Welcome to Decode Station. I'm Sarah. Tonight we are entering the darkest intersection of wealth, power, and absolute depravity, the Jeffrey Epstein case. How did a man with no documented source of wealth hold power over the global elite? Was this a financial empire or a global blackmail operation?
Thanks for having me, Sarah. The Epstein files aren't just about one man's crimes. They expose a protected network of global elites that was designed to be untouchable.
So we're not just looking at, a true crime story tonight. This feels much more like a noir thriller.
It does.
Except the victims are real, the pain is immeasurable, and the ending.
Well, it doesn't exactly offer any closure. It feels like we're just examining this systemic cover-up that goes back decades.
Precisely. And if we want to understand this, we have to look past the headlines and really look at the machinery that allowed it all to happen.
Okay, so where do we start? We are going to walk through the timeline of this phantom financier. We'll dissect that baffling 2008 legal immunity deal, map out the logistics of his global trafficking network, and then finally look at the forensic anomalies surrounding his death.
Let's start with the money. Because in stories like this, money is almost always the first clue that something is really wrong.
It is.
The narrative we were all sold, the one the media bought for years, was that Epstein was some brilliant financial wizard, a self-made billionaire with the Midas touch. But when you actually strip that away and look at his resume, does the math even add up?
It really doesn't. And that is the first major red flag that any forensic accountant would spot immediately. You have a man born in 1953 from a blue-collar background who starts his professional life not on Wall Street but as a math teacher.
At the Dalton School, right. A prestigious place.
Exactly. He lands a job at Bear Stearns, which is a legitimate investment bank, but he leaves in 1981. And after that, the record it effectively goes dark.
And that's the part that I just can't wrap my head around. He claimed he was a private money manager for the ultra-wealthy. That was the cover.
It was a great cover story.
It is, because it implies secrecy. Oh, I handle money for billionaires, so I can't talk about it. But in the actual financial world, even private money managers leave a paper trail, don't they?
They absolutely do.
Mm-hmm.
To manage that level of capital, and we're talking billions, supposedly, you need infrastructure. You usually have a hedge fund structure. You have registered investors. Crucially, you have financial disclosures filed with regulatory bodies like the SEC.
So things like 13F filings.
Exactly. 13F filings if you're holding large positions in public stocks. With Epstein, there was a complete void. Nothing.
So no registered clients, no filings.
Zero. There are no publicly available records of a traditional hedge fund structure, no list of clients, no real explanation for how he accumulated the kind of fortune that buys a private island, a massive ranch in New Mexico, and one of the largest private homes in Manhattan.
Which forces you back to the question I posed at the top. If there is no real business record, where did the money come from? It feels like the money manager title was just a costume he wore to get into the party.
That ambiguity was his greatest asset. Because he couldn't point to a specific trade or a deal that made him rich, like, say, a George Soros or a Warren Buffett, it opens the door to the theory that his wealth wasn't from finance at all.
It just got him in the door.
It allowed him to infiltrate high society without anyone asking too many questions. I mean, if you're introduced as managing money for the elite, you're in the room. You're at the dinners. You are on the planes.
And once you're in the room, you are collecting information. This is where that noir element really kicks in. If the money wasn't from stocks, maybe it was from silence. The whole blackmail archive theory.
It's a compelling theory because it explains the anomalies. Why would these powerful men associate with him? Why would they fly on his private plane? If he's a broker of secrets rather than stocks, the whole operation makes a very different kind of sense. But before we get to the end of his life, we have to look at the first time the mask almost slipped. The year is 2005, Palm Beach, Florida.
This should have been it. This should have been the end of the story. Police in Palm Beach start investigating allegations that he's sexually abusing minors. They raid his house. They have evidence. They have victims ready to testify.
This is a pivotal moment. The evidence was absolutely mounting. He was facing potential federal prosecution charges that, given the number of victims and the severity of the crimes, could have put him away for life.
But that's not what happened. Instead, in 2008, we get what might be the most baffling legal outcome in modern American history, the non-prosecution agreement.
It's a shocking document. And for the listeners who aren't lawyers, I want to explain exactly how strange it is. An NPA is usually used for, say, a corporation to avoid criminal charges in exchange for a fine or changing their behavior. It is almost never used for a sex offender.
He got one.
He struck a deal with federal prosecutors.
And the terms of that deal.
He pled guilty only to state-level solicitation charges.
Solicitation. That sounds like a misdemeanor, like he just paid for a service. We're talking about the systematic abuse of minors, and they downgraded it to solicitation.
It gets worse. For that plea, he received an 18-month sentence. But he only served 13 of those months. And the conditions of that sentence, most of that time was served under work release.
Okay, let's break that down for the listener, because work release sounds so bureaucratic. What did his day actually look like?
And it means he was allowed to leave the jail in the morning, go to his office in West Palm Beach, spend up to 12 hours there,
Unsupervised.
completely unsupervised, and then return to the jail to sleep.
So he was basically commuting to jail. It was a hotel with a curfew.
That's a good way to put it. It was barely incarceration. But the most insidious part of this agreement, the part that suggests this was about protecting more than just Epstein, is the co-conspirator clause.
This is the detail that keeps me up at night. The agreement didn't just protect him. It had a blast radius.
The agreement explicitly granted immunity to any unnamed potential co-conspirators.
Unnamed. So it's a blanket protection policy for anyone else who might have been involved.
Yes, it effectively shut down the ability of the state to pursue anyone who helped him. And here's the real kicker. The victims were not informed of this deal.
Which is a violation of the Crime Victims' Rights Act, isn't it?
It is. Court findings later confirmed that the victims were kept completely in the dark. They thought justice was being pursued, while in reality, a secret deal had already been signed to let him and his network off the hook.
It sends such a clear, devastating message. If you have enough money or maybe enough dirt on the right people, the justice system works for you, not against you.
Exactly.
Let's shift to the machinery of this operation, because you don't abuse that many people in that many places without some serious infrastructure.
No, you don't. And Epstein's infrastructure was global. We're not talking about a crime of opportunity in some back alley. We are talking about high-profile properties. A massive townhouse as Manhattan, the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, and of course, Little St. James in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
The private island, it sounds like something from a movie, but it was real. And to get between these places, you need the Lolita Express.
That's the colloquial name for his private Boeing 727. And the flight logs, or manifests, from that plane have become a central piece of evidence and a source of intense public speculation.
I mean, I've seen the list. It reads like a who's who of the early 2000s, presidents, princes, business titans, famous academics.
It does. The logs document extensive travel by some of the most powerful people on the planet. But, and I have to be the voice of legal caution here, we need to be very precise for the listener.
Okay.
Presence on those flight logs is a fact. But, legally speaking, presence on the plane does not constitute evidence that those passengers participated in any criminal activity.
Right. You could just be catching a ride. But it does raise a moral question, doesn't it? If you're on a plane owned by a known sex trafficker, and even before 2008, there were rumors flying to a private island.
Yeah.
What did you see? What did you choose to ignore?
Exactly. It speaks to the normalization of his behavior. These people were validating him, providing him with a shield of legitimacy. I can't be a monster. Look who I'm having dinner with. But to your earlier point about infrastructure, he wasn't running this alone.
No, he had help. And that brings us to the accomplice.
Ghislaine Maxwell. For a long time, the narrative focused solely on Epstein. But you really can't understand the operation without her. She wasn't just a girlfriend, she was a lieutenant, an operational manager.
And the courts agreed. I mean, this isn't speculation anymore.
They did. She was arrested in 2020, charged with assisting in recruiting, grooming, and trafficking underage girls. In December 2021, she was convicted on multiple federal counts and sentenced to 20 years in prison.
That conviction is so important. It legally proves this was a conspiracy. Witness testimony showed she was right there, facilitating the abuse, normalizing it.
It confirms the network aspect of it. A single predator is dangerous. A predator with a recruiter and a logistics manager. That's a syndicate.
So the network is established. The crimes are documented. Fast forward to July 2019. The system finally seems to wake up. Epstein is arrested by the Southern District of New York. This is it. The big trial everyone's been waiting for.
The indictment covered the period between 2002 and 2005. He's denied bail. He's put in the Metropolitan Correctional Center, the MCC.
And for anyone who doesn't know, the MCC isn't some low-security camp. It's often called the Guantanamo of New York. It holds terrorists, drug lords. It is supposed to be one of the most secure facilities in the country.
And yet, on August 10th, 2019, the most high-profile prisoner in America, is found dead in his cell.
And this is where the noir element becomes overwhelming. The official ruling was suicide by hanging. But when you look at the conditions that night, the level of incompetence required for this to happen is just staggering.
It wasn't just one thing going wrong. It was a sequence of failures so perfect it almost looks scripted.
Walk us through it. What specifically failed?
Okay, first, the human element. The 2 guards assigned to his unit fell asleep. That is a catastrophic failure. Second, procedure. Mandatory cell checks, which are supposed to happen every 30 minutes, were skipped for hours.
And the cameras, I mean, we live in a surveillance state.
Yeah.
We can track a package around the world, but we couldn't watch the most important prisoner in the world.
Apparently not. The cameras facing his cell were either malfunctioning or the footage was missing due to technical errors. So you have this trifecta of failure: human, procedural, and technical, all at the same time.
It's the perfect storm. And honestly, it strains credulity. How does that happen by accident?
That's the question that fuels all the skepticism. And it's not just internet sleuths asking. There's a genuine forensic debate here about the autopsy itself.
Right, because the autopsy wasn't exactly clear-cut for everyone.
The New York City medical examiner officially ruled it a suicide. However, Epstein's family hired Dr. Michael Baden, a very prominent pathologist, to observe. Baden later stated publicly that he saw neck injuries, specifically fractures in the hyoid bone, that were more consistent with homicidal strangulation than with hanging.
Okay, the hyoid bone, that's a small bone in the neck.
Yes, and while it can break during a hanging, especially in older individuals, statistics show it's significantly more common in strangulation. Baden's argument was that the pattern of breakage pointed to force being applied. Now, the official cause of death remains suicide. That hasn't changed. But those dissenting expert opinions provide a scientific basis for the doubt.
It just reinforces that feeling that he knew too much. If he had gone to trial, if he had started talking, who would go down with him? His death closed the case on his testimony. He can never name names.
And that silence is the ultimate tragedy for the victims. They were denied their day in court against him. The criminal case was dismissed because you cannot prosecute a dead man.
But the story didn't completely die with him. We're still seeing the ripples. Just recently, 2023, 2024, we had the unsealing of all those documents.
Yes, those stemmed from civil litigation. A defamation suit filed by Virginia Giuffre against Ghislaine Maxwell. The courts ordered them unsealed.
And suddenly the headlines were on fire again, names were dropping left and right, but we need to be careful how we interpret these, right?
We do. We have to parse what these documents are. They're depositions, emails, legal motions. They reference high-profile people, but the courts themselves have stated that inclusion reflects allegations. It does not equate to criminal guilt.
So just because a name appears, it doesn't mean they were part of the abuse.
Exactly. They might have been mentioned as being at a dinner or someone Epstein bragged about knowing. But what the documents do show, indisputably, is the depth of his connections. They paint a picture of a man who is deeply embedded in the establishment.
It validates the victims' stories. They said they saw these powerful people. The documents confirm these people were in his orbit. It wasn't a delusion.
It just brings us back to the systemic failure. When you look at the entire saga, from the mystery money to the sweetheart deal in 2008 to the security failures at the jail, it's a portrait of unequal treatment under the law.
It feels like there are two justice systems, one for the people listening to this and one for the people on those flight logs.
That's the inescapable conclusion. I mean, the 2008 agreement is the starkest example. A regular person caught in a similar crime does not get a custom-written non-prosecution agreement that protects their friends. That is a luxury product.
And the cost of that luxury product was the suffering of dozens, if not hundreds, of young women.
The legacy of this case is that it exposed the mechanisms of silence. It showed us how legal agreements can be weaponized to hide the truth, how philanthropy can be used to whitewash a reputation.
And it showed us that even when the truth comes out, accountability is so rare. Maxwell is in prison, Epstein is dead, but the potential co-conspirators from that 2008 deal, we still don't know the full list.
We have a peek, but the full picture that might remain buried in archives that will never be opened.
So we're left with open wounds. The victims have to live with the trauma, and the public has to live with the knowledge that the system failed at every single turn.
It forces us to confront a very uncomfortable reality about power. We like to think that justice is blind, but the Epstein case suggests that justice can be dazzled by wealth and influence.
It's not just dazzled, it feels like it was blinded. Deliberately.
I think the whole thing is a warning. It's a warning about the lack of transparency in our financial systems, a warning about the lack of oversight in our justice system, and a warning about the fragility of our correctional systems.
It's a systemic collapse. Or maybe, and this is the darker thought, the system worked exactly as it was designed to. It protected the powerful until it couldn't, and then it eliminated the liability.
That is the cynical but perhaps accurate view. The dark investigative noir isn't just a style, it's the reality of this case.
Before we wrap up, I want to go back to the victims for a second, because in all this talk of billionaires and pathology, they can get lost.
That's a crucial point. The real story isn't the intrigue, it's the predation. The system allowed a predator to operate for decades. Every time a guard looked the other way, or prosecutor signed a lenient deal, or celebrity boarded that plane, they were contributing to an environment where vulnerable people could be exploited.
And that's why we have to keep talking about it, not for the sensationalism, but because silence is what allowed it to happen in the first place.
Absolutely. Sunlight is the only disinfectant. These deep dives, the unsealing of documents, the trials, it's all part of ensuring that the history books record this not as a mystery, but as a failure that must never be repeated.
Though looking at the world today, I have to wonder if we've really learned the lesson. The structures that protected him, the offshore accounts, the NDAs, the closed-door deals, they are all still in place.
They are. The players might change, but the game remains largely the same.
That is a chilling thought to end on.
It's a somber reflection on the nature of power. While Epstein and Maxwell are gone, or imprisoned, the system that allowed them to operate, the secrecy, the financial ambiguity, and the legal protections for the wealthy remains largely intact.
Stay curious, stay skeptical.